Blog Talk Radio.
Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust. Broadcasting live presents Two Guys and a Bible with Don Preston and William Bell. Join us each week at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central as we bring you exciting, sound, challenging, and comforting messages regarding the end times. Thank you for tuning in today. Don Preston is the founder of Preterist Research Institute, or PRI. Don is a prolific author, having written and published 19 books, a host of audio and DVD studies, and is a debater and defender of the full preterist view. His websites are BibleProphecy.com, Eschatology.org, and DonKPreston.com. William Bell is the founder of AllThingsFulfilled.com Ministries and has a website bearing the same name, and has authored 3 books, audios, and DVDs. He has published hundreds of articles and recordings. And now, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Two Guys and a Bible broadcast with Don Preston and William Bell. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Two Guys in the Bible right here on Fulfill Radio. I'm William Bell. With me is Dr. Don Preston. We are delighted to be with you. Don, how are you doing today? How is Oklahoma doing with the weather? And what else is going on in your world? We were just talking about,
Right. Well, I'm sitting here looking out my picture window here in my living room, and it's snowing, and it's increasingly strong in the snowfall. We had only gotten here, right here in the Ardmore area, we'd only gotten about 3 or 4 inches, which is still a lot for us. Historically, well, in fact, I think it's been almost 20 years since Ardmore proper got as many as 5 or 6 inches of snow. And when I got up this morning, it was 8 degrees below zero. And it has definitely been 20 years, right at 20 years, since we've had this kind of cold, bitter weather. And I've been spending a lot of time in my easy chair by my fireplace. I used up all of my firewood. I actually had a guy on Facebook advertising firewood at a decent price. I texted him, asked a whole raft of questions, sounded good, and he gets here, and I should have turned it down, to be honest about it. The pieces of firewood are very, very small. They're 16 inches long. They do good to be 16 inches long, and they're green as a gourd. And I thought to myself, well, okay, he's here. I'm completely, totally out of firewood. I'll go ahead and do it. But I let him know that I was not very happy at all, that he was misrepresenting his product. And he said, well, I can get you a rick of wood of, larger pieces if you want. I said, no, don't worry, don't bother. So I know who he is, and he won't be getting any more of my money. It was, just one of those type of things that he's a young man. He's obviously taking advantage of people who want firewood and who are willing not to ask the questions. And even though I asked questions, he lied to me about what he was offering. And so it's really, really sad when people think they've got to take advantage of other people in a situation like it is. It is bitter cold. Thankfully, we haven't had any of the rolling blackouts that they've been talking about. A good friend of mine, a man that Jim Wade, they live south of us, not quite 100 miles, but he had sent me an email earlier in the day and said that they are experiencing rolling blackouts. It's already affected some of their appliances, and so, pardon me, it's not a very good situation at all. Thankfully, like I said, for us personally, we have not experienced any of the rolling blackouts. But I thought to myself, well, and that's when the young man was actually here. If we started having rolling blackouts, I'm completely out of wood, even though the wood is not what he told me, even though he lied to me. If I've got some wood, then Jan and I can stand in front of the fireplace and we can hug the fireplace during a rolling blackout. And so that's the major reason I went ahead and paid the money like I did. But it's really interesting times, that's for sure. I made a comment to a friend of mine the other day in contemplation of this when we were, corresponding back and forth. And I said, well, the funny thing about it is, I said, here we've got record cold weather here in Ardmore, Oklahoma. We've got snow that we haven't had the likes of for 20 years. So I said, to me, this is a really good testimony to global warming. I said,
well,
shouldn't it be getting hotter?
Absolutely. Our good friend Larry Siegel called me yesterday, and he says, well, it's about 85. He said it's about 85 degrees here. Sun is shining.
Yeah.
He said, how are things going over there in Memphis? Of course, I knew he already knew. But, yeah, he called to rub it in a little bit.
Yeah, I had to rub it in. Daniel
Rogers
sent me a text or a message on Facebook when I posted what it was like this morning. I think he said it was something like 74 degrees down there, and had other people from South Florida telling me it was 75, 80 degrees. And I told him, that's not even nice. It's not even nice to post on my Facebook message when I'm bemoaning how cold it is.
Yeah. I think the only place I've been the last 2 days has been to the mailbox, and of course, they had a holiday yesterday, which I had forgotten about, so I trekked out to the street, and then I went back again today, and that's about it as far as my being outside. But it is cold here, and we've got snow. I don't know whether it's snowing outside now. The last time I checked, it wasn't, but we've got 3 or 4 inches, maybe more. I think they said it was about 6 inches, but it's pretty snowy and bright out here, and very, very cold. So we hope people are staying warm in this particular area, and not venturing out in that stuff too much if you don't have to.
Well, our son lives in a house that is down on the lake. Which of course means it's even colder down there than it is here, and it's not a well insulated house. It's a pretty poorly built house, and we've asked him, well, how are you getting by? And he said, well, actually we're getting by just pretty well. And he started to leave on one of his boat delivery trips the other day, just before this awful stuff hit. Well, actually, I should take that back. He had to deliver a boat to the East Coast, and it was immediately after the black ice had hit. And he had to deliver this boat that was valued at over $500,000. And we're going, surely you're not going to take off in this weather of black ice to deliver a boat valued at $500,000. And he said, well, I got to. He said, I've got to make some money. This is my job. And so needless to say, Mom and Dad just fretted and fumed and prayed all the time he was gone. And he was telling Jan on the phone when he got back. And he made it safely. But he had a coworker from his job follow him. I guess that was something the boss wanted done. But followed him all the way out there, and they had to go. One of the ways that they went was Turner Turnpike, which was just ice packed. And he said once they got there and were unloaded, the boat was safely delivered. He said his buddy told him, he said, I got to tell you something, dude. He said, I was following you there, and of course, they weren't going over 30, 40 miles an hour the whole time. And on black ice, that's too fast. But he said, I've never seen such a good job of driving in all my life. He said, every time I looked up, that boat was trying to go sideways. And he said, you just kept right on trucking, correcting, getting it straightened out. And he said, man, I've never seen such a job, of driving to keep that boat going where you needed to go with it. I go, oh, man, I didn't need to hear all that.
Yeah, well,
they made it safe.
That's what you do as a professional driver. Well, our fireplace is one of these prefab deals, so I haven't used it since we've been here. I think I turned it on once. And in the previous house, of course, I used to chop wood and burn the fireplace all the time. So I missed that, but we've been keeping warm, and it hasn't been much of a problem. But I have heard that people in the Texas area and maybe some others have had some power outages and everything. And man, that's got to be tough, during this kind of weather.
That's very tough. That's what Jim was saying. He said the thing about it is the rolling blackouts are not lasting an awful long time. He said they'll go off and they'll stay off. If I remember correctly what he said, they'll stay off for about 30, 45 minutes, and then they come back on. Well, again, that's difficult. That's hard on appliances. And he has a very elderly mother who's very, very feeble, and she's been in bad health for a good little while. And he said, we've been having trouble keeping her warm. Well, if that's true in his case, that's true in multiple cases of people who have health issues. And so how are they going to fare? Jan and I have not suffered, like I said, thankfully. Now, our air conditioning unit did freeze up. My best friend here in town is a heat and air specialist, one of the most highly qualified heat and air guys in town, as a matter of fact. And so I called him, and our unit has a setting on it that says emergency heat. And so he told me, he said, just push that button. And he said, what that does is that switches from your outside unit to your inside unit. And I had no earthly idea we had that capability. We pushed that button, Jan pushed that button, and I mean, it's just been operating flawlessly ever since. But I'm assuming the outside unit is still frozen up, and it will take some days of warmer weather for it to begin functioning properly. But like I said, we're nice and toasty inside. We do have the auxiliary fireplace here, and you mentioned your fireplace being prefab. Well, ours is not what you would call a really highly efficient fireplace by any stretch of the imagination. It's a whole lot of decoration. It does have a fan on it to where if you've got a really good fire going, you can blow heated air out into the living room. And it's even got a thermostat on it. Unfortunately, the thermostat has decided to die. And then you add to it the fact that now I've got this almost worthless wood that doesn't want to burn. And I can't get a fire in that fireplace that's hot enough to heat up the heat chamber to turn on the fan. So again, I'm not real happy with the young man that sold me this firewood, but we'll get by. We got plenty of blankets, and as long as the rolling blackouts do not hit us, we'll be okay. We'll be just fine. And even if they do, if it's not off for long, we've got warm blankets here, and we can just bundle up and we can snuggle. We can keep warm. So one way or the other, we'll be warm.
Yeah, well, that's good. And again, we hope that everyone else out there who's listening to us and is in this type of weather will also be very careful and very safe. I heard some fire trucks going off, sirens going off around the neighborhood. And I know from, having worked at the utility company that what a lot of people do during this time is they start getting all kinds of makeshift heaters to try to keep themselves warm. And a lot of them may not be, really up to standard or code, or they overdrive them, trying to keep warm, turn them up to the last notch, whether they are electrical or sometimes they'll try to bring in some other type of heat, and a lot of times, it starts fires in the houses. So just hope that, that kind of situation is not going on, because, they, unfortunately, you have a lot of fires during cold weather, believe it or not. And,
yes.
And that's because they're trying to, heat their houses. And as a matter of fact, a tenant of mine called me the other night, man. I had just got in the bed, right? Just got in the bed. Fortunately, it was early in the afternoon, so I was, just getting in the bed to just kind of hang out with Leora a little bit and lay down and watch a little television. And about the time I got in and got comfortable, here comes a phone call. The heater is not heating, and the water heater is off. Well,
oh boy.
Yeah. So I, got up and went over there and walked in the house, and all I felt was heat. And the temperature was 73 degrees.
Woo!
And she said, "Well, that's as high it will go." I'm saying,
Lady,
you call me out of bed for this.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
So I turned the thermostat up a little bit more. I said, "Well, did you try turning up the thermostat?" And I think she said, "Yeah," but I'm not sure if she did, because it, I turned it up. It went up a few more notches, and I said, "Okay." But I actually took a couple of, portable heaters over there, because I thought she might have been out of heat for the night. And I said, "Well, at least you'll have some heat for the night, because those things do pretty good." And so I left those, and then I went over to the water heater and punched the button on it. That has one of those automatic pilot lights, and punched the button on it, and the flame just lit right up, just pretty blue flame. And I said, "Okay, well, the good thing about it is I didn't have to pay for somebody to come and do it, but at the same time, it was something that, of course, I know they probably wouldn't know how to do it, but the heater, that was the main concern I had, and thing was just blasting in there. But I know some people like it to be 80 and 90 degrees. I mean, you'd be surprised. And when I used to work for MLGNW, we had to go and turn on, the service for new homes, or, new service connects and things like that, and troubleshoot. And you walk in the house and the people talk about the heat, and, sometimes in the winter. And I mean, in most of these houses you went into, sometimes the people who could least afford, a high utility bill, they were the ones who had the heaters up at 80 and 90 degrees. I mean, you walk in there and you sweat. But that's the way it is. So, and, as a result, you have these occasional fires going on because, people are, just, they're running all kinds of space heaters and things like that. So if you know anybody like that, tell them to be careful.
Well, as a matter of fact, I was on the phone with an individual today. I won't name any names at all, but we were talking about how cold it is, and they said, "Well, we've got our oven in the kitchen on with the door down." And I go, "Oh boy, you got to be careful."
Don't mention that. Yeah,
that is dangerous.
You walk in there,
and they say,
Go ahead.
Well, I said that's an extremely dangerous situation. You've got to be very, very cautious with that and keep an eye on it. That was not intended to heat your house. It'll be all right.
All the burners lit and everything.
Yes. But
and I mean, in a pinch, if you need to warm down the house, I mean, if that's all the heat you got, fine. But you should, as you say, stay in there and watch it.
Exactly.
Because you never know, what could happen.
Yeah. Well, all right. It is good to be with you. I tell you what, Jan was saying, it's sure nice to have a nice warm house. It's nice to have, such wonderful facilities. An awful lot of people do not have that. We were driving the other day before it got so bitterly cold, and we noticed one of the grocery carts that belonged to an homeless individual. And we just made the comment, in light of what's coming, my goodness gracious, it would be so awful to be homeless and to have no place to go, because this kind of weather will kill you. There is no question whatsoever about that. And so we were just talking among ourselves how dangerous it is for the homeless right now, and how good it is that there are facilities available from the city to where they can find shelter from this kind of weather. So we hope and pray that that those who are homeless, who find themselves in that horrible situation, that they don't find themselves out on the street tonight, or that hopefully they weren't out on the street last night, because like I said, when I got up this morning, it was 8 degrees below zero, and you don't even want to be out. If you've got a warm car and a warm house, you don't want to be out in 8 degree below zero with skin exposed, because that will cause damage to you. So it's scary stuff. It really honestly is.
Yes, very much so. And again, to encourage everybody to be careful with that situation. Of course, Leora was out there playing in the snow today. She had.
I can tell you this. I haven't been out playing in the snow. And furthermore, I'm not going to be out playing in the snow. I'm just not a cold weather person. And I can also add this little piece to that. We have 2 dogs. We have a Rhodesian Ridgeback, big dog, and he's absolutely a beautiful, beautiful dog, one of the most kind, gentle-natured dogs I've ever had in my life. We have a little Heinz 57/Pit, little female. They are 2 of the sweetest dogs you will ever encounter in your life. They do not want to go outside, and we have a sunroom.
Smart dogs.
Yes, we have a sunroom, and it's got a window heater / air conditioner in it. And of course, they have to go outside to relieve themselves. We don't want them messing up our sunroom. Thankfully, they are trained. Don't know if they train themselves. I don't know what the deal is, but they let us know when they've got to go out, or when Jan and I think it's time for them to go out, we kind of entice them with a treat, and we take them outside of the door, hand them the treat. Well, the little Heinz / Pit, she's got to where I better not hold that door open behind me. She will grab that. She'll grab that snack and run right straight back into her bed. And like, gotcha. Thank you very much. You can close the door now. But I feed them outside, and we let them stay outside so that they can do their constitutional, so to speak. And we watch them as they leave the patio and they go out and do their business. And then, they're right back at that back door, pounding on that door, saying, let us in. And as I sit here at my computer in my living room right now, I'm looking across the living room at the big Rhodesian. We let him in because he's so gentle, and he's actually afraid of our house cats. He wants nothing whatsoever to do with those house cats. Of course, they don't care much for him either, but when we let him in, he stretches out on one of our rugs, and he just crashes, and that's all there is to it. But we have to leave the little female, we call her Liddy, we have to leave her in the sunroom because she would have cat for supper the minute we would let her in. She wants a hold of those cats so bad, she cannot stand it. And so we don't dare let her in the house. But they don't like this cold weather at all. And like you said, I don't blame them a bit. But I do have to say this. It's the very first time in my life that I've ever had a situation in which we let a dog in the house, even during bad weather. When I was growing up, you didn't do that. Dogs just made their way, and they'd find a tree to be under. They'd find something. They'd make themselves a hole in the ground, and they'd climb in it or something like that. And in retrospect, that was pretty tough. Never lost a dog ever, but I'm sure they suffered an awful lot. But I can assure you, these two dogs do not suffer. they are as spoiled as two dogs that you will ever find in your life. They are, as they used to have a saying, they are enjoying the dog's life right now. It's funny.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Interesting always, and especially when animals are involved and get in the mix of dealing with some of these scenarios and situations that we have. It's always funny.
Yeah. Well, they have a way of worming themselves into our hearts. And like I said, the big dog, the Rhodesian Ridgeback, he adopted us, literally adopted us, when I was in Kansas City. You were there as well, speaking at Joseph Vincent's conference. I called home to check on Jan. I said, "How you doing?" She said, "Well, I'm doing great, and it appears that we've been adopted." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "Well, I went out to get the newspaper, and the minute I opened the glass door, this dog ran into the house before I could even stop him." And I was like, "Do what?" Because I had a dog in the backyard. He was a big old chow. He was not a nice dog. I'll put it like that. And I had to keep him under watch at all times because he would climb the fence and chase cars. He finally caught one and got his back broken. I had to put him down. But nonetheless, ran into the house, and Jan said she could not get him to go outside no matter what. Finally, she took some food outside and gave it to him, and that's the only way that she could, get him to go outside. And long story short, we wound up keeping him, and we've had him ever since. And when was that? When was that Kansas or when was that conference up there? Joseph Smith, Vincent's.
2011. 2011.
Well, see, yeah, been 10 years, and we've had him ever since. But, boy, he's a beautiful dog. He really is. And he truly is my buddy. He's my pal. And he just, and of course, I'm his alpha. And so he just worships me like crazy and thinks I'm just the greatest thing in all the world. So it's funny how our pets have a way, like I said, of worming themselves into our hearts, into our affections and what have you, because I really, really do like my dog. We call him Max. And he's quite the dog. I had just very quickly, and then we'll get into our lesson. I had some people come here to buy some car parts off of me about 3 years ago, and we were standing by the fence, and pardon me. This guy says, "I don't know when I've seen a prettier dog." He said that dog is just absolutely beautiful. I mean, he's built. Boy, he is built. And just a picture when he stands sideways, and he just looks so regal and beautiful. And he goes, "Would you sell me that dog?" And I said, "Do what?" He said, "I just lost my buddy, my dog." And he said, "I'm looking for another dog." And he said, "I want to buy your dog." And I said, "Well, sir, I'm sorry." I said, "That's my buddy. That's my pal." And I said, I absolutely would not sell him under any circumstances. And he said, "Well, I don't blame you." We talked a little while longer, went over and did our business. And before he left, before he got in his truck, he said, "Listen, I'm serious." He said, "Would you let me make an offer to you for that dog?" He said, "I'll give you a lot of money for that dog." He said, I miss my dog so much. And he said, "That's just got to be one of the most beautiful dogs I've ever seen in my life." And he had petted him and stroked him, and Max was just friendly to him and all that kind of stuff. But he told me, he said, "I'll give you a lot of money for him." He said, "I'll give it to you right now. Just let me take him home." I said, "Well," I said, "I'm sorry. I appreciate the offer. But," I said, "I don't know what I'd do without that dog." I said, He's just my best friend right now." And I said, "No, you're not getting my dog." That was sure an unusual circumstance.
Well, I'm sure he saw what he thought was a beautiful dog as well, and felt like he could offer enough money to get him. But, when you get attached to an animal like that, you're not going to sell him, at least not easily, unless you're raising them for that purpose. But no, people are not going to sell. It's like part of the family.
Yeah, they really are. And, I've had a bunch of dogs down through the years. And, in my younger days when a dog got sick and infirmed, and it was obvious, the vet tells you they're not going to get better, they're just old. Do you want me to put them down? And I said, no, I'll take care of it. So I'd bring them home, and I'd put them out of their misery. I'd take them out into the field, and I'd shoot them, and I'd bury them. And I've gotten so attached to the last 2 or 3 dogs that I've had. They have been such good friends of mine and so loyal to me that I couldn't do it. I've had to take them to the vet, and I said, I'm sorry, I can't do this. I don't know if that's part of getting older, getting more sensitive. I honestly don't know what it is, but there's no one in this world that I could kill, shoot the last 2 or 3 dogs that I've had. Lance did it for me on one of them, and the others, I took them to the vet. And, that kind of turned into an animal show tonight. But the last one that we had to put down called him Whizzer. And that's because he got so excited as a puppy when he saw me that he was whizzing all over my boots. And he would not let anybody touch him. It was like he saw me as a sucker. He was going to go home with me no matter what. And we did. He was loyal to me. He absolutely loved me. He was very, very defensive of me. If anybody came around, he didn't want them close to me. He let them know real quick. You're standing too close to him now. And so we had to make sure we were outside the fence. But anyway, we had to put Wiz down, and I brought him home. Brought him home from the vet, and we were having some electrical line and water line run out in our field, and out to the east of the house, and you know where that's at. And the guy with the backhoe was out there, and I had Whizzer in a bag, great big bag. I carried him out there, and I was going to dig the hole myself. Well, here's the guy with the backhoe. And I thought to myself, it'll probably cost me $100 to have him dig a hole. But I had him stop, and I told him, I said, look, here's the deal. I said, in that bag there is my good buddy dog that I've had for a long, long time. And I said, I had to have him put down today. And I said, I've got to dig a hole. And I said, I'd really like for him to be buried deep. But I said, I was going to dig one as deep as I could go. And I said, I want to know how much you'll charge me to dig a hole for him. And he said, you tell me where you want that hole. And he said, here's the deal. I just had to bury my dog that I have had for over 12 years. Said he went everywhere with me. He was in the truck with me everywhere I went. He was my best friend. And he said, I've got to tell you, I cried when he died. And I said, well, I haven't cried over this, but I said, I'm just really, really torn up about it. I was very attached to the dog because he was my good as well. And the guy says, you tell me where you want the hole. I'll dig it however deep you want it dug. And he said, I'll pat it down, and you don't owe me a dime because I know exactly what you're going through. So he did. He dug a hole 6 foot deep. And, he covered it up. He patted it down. And so that dog got a proper burial, if you can say that. So anyway, that's my dog tale for the night. I'll leave it at that. And we'll get back into the book of Ezekiel 45. And by the way, you mentioned, William, very, very quickly, mentioned people listening to us. And I've heard this week already from some people who listen to us here on Two Guys and a Bible on Fulfilled Radio. And they've expressed their appreciation for this program and what it means to them in their life. And Another anecdote very, very quickly. I've heard from a guy who had been listening to you and to me, and he had been a part of the Torah observant movement. And he said, as a result of your videos and my videos, he has abandoned that movement and was just expressing so much appreciation for our ministries. And even though we are independent of one another, we obviously share similar convictions, similar beliefs, and he expressed all of that and was expressing appreciation for the ministry and for the fact that we work so well together, and that we lay the scriptures out there, we exegete them according to context, we do not take them out of context, and he was just expressing the joy that he feels to be free of that Torah observant movement now, and how sad he feels for the people who are still there. And he was wanting me to share with him, I don't know if he's contacted you or not, but he was wanting me to share with him some thoughts to share with his friends who are still in that movement and who think that they are supposed to continue to keep the law of Moses. And so I wrote out a fairly lengthy little bit of I won't call it a dissertation, but a little bit of kind of outline points and bullet points to share with him, and he wrote back and thanked me for that very, very much. So, it's always great to hear from people who are listening to the program, who are benefiting from the program, who are sharing the thoughts from the program, because, folks, that's why we're here. William and I want to share with you what we glean from the Word of God. We're not trying to be sensationalistic. We're not trying to be, quote, fancy. All that we want to be is servants of God, because that's what we are. And we want to share with you the insights that we have that have helped us to understand the Word of God better, and that truth has helped us to live richer, fuller, more liberated lives as we enjoy the presence of God in our lives. So I just had to share that little bit before we get into the text this evening, because it's so great to hear from people and to hear that the program is being a blessing in their life.
Well, that is certainly true, and just very, very much a blessing to be able to share this message. We've done it over the years, continue to do it. People continue to respond to it. And it's a rewarding ministry to look back over and see what has been accomplished over time. We talk about that all the time, but it's really a blessing to have been a part of this and to continue to be a part of it, and to see the fruit of it, blossoming around the world. And now people, around the world are just as close as a punch on the keyboard, and and that's really good. So you end up making friends all over the place and having opportunity to teach, and there are other guys opening up forums and everything, and sponsoring debates and discussions within them. So it's a lot of activity going on. Everybody thinks maybe, or at least some people probably think that the whole world revolves around Facebook with 192 people on the page,
191.
But it's much bigger than that. It's much bigger than that. So that's the way things are, and we're really grateful for it.
Amen to that. All right, well, folks, let's get in the time that we have left. William is so long-winded talking about his dogs that.
Let me give you my dog story. Story. All right. The last dog I had, I was about 10 years old, and I think she was a playful little mixed collie, and had grown up, and so because it wouldn't bother anybody, but if they played with her, and these were just the neighbors who knew, if they played with her, then she would snap at them a little bit with her hand. So one of the neighbors did that, and she snapped at his hand, and, put a little teeth bite in his hand. Nothing really, really serious. But his mom got all up in the air about it. They called the dog pound on my dog. I didn't have $10 to get her out. and that was about the end of my dog rearing career. So with the exception of one time when Nisi first started driving, over the road, she left her dog here for me to keep. And I think I'd dog sit for maybe 2 to 3 weeks or something. But that's about it for the most part. So I'm unattached right now, and I try not to get attached too much. I love dogs. I really do. But I know that I'm not going to, really take care of them the way they should be cared for. So I'm not going to put them through the misery.
Well, I can appreciate that, and I probably don't spend as much time with my dogs as I really should. I do. I don't just try, but I do. I pet them, stroke them, talk to them every single day. They are extremely spoiled. I give them snacks during the day when I'm here. During this bad weather, all of the snow and the ice, in order to take them outside, I have to bribe them with a treat, so they get a treat. A lot of times when they come in, I give them a treat, and then we feed them, and they eat very well, I might add. The dog people say you're not supposed to overfeed your dogs, and if there's a danger that I have, it's overfeeding my dogs. They are both sleek. Boy, they are sleek, but they're full of energy. I mean, they they run and they rip and they romp. They're not rotund. They're not obese by any stretch of the imagination, but they're well taken care of. And our cats are as well. We have 2 cats inside, and so it would be like getting a really good solid raise if we didn't have any pets, because we do spend money on their food and on their health. So anyway, all right, back to Ezekiel. Ezekiel 45. I have mentioned on the program before how in formal public debate, I have challenged my dispensational opponents with the problem of Ezekiel. Because I asked them before the debates, does Ezekiel, 40 to 47, predict a literal physical temple that will be rebuilt or be built in Jerusalem? And does it describe the worship that will be given there? And without a doubt, and without hesitation, and without exception, they tell me, yes, that is absolutely true. Ezekiel 40 to 47 describes a literal physical temple that will be built in Jerusalem in the millennium. Well, that leads to a discussion of Ezekiel 45, 15, and following. Now, since we're so close on time, I won't read the entirety of the text. Perhaps next week when we hopefully won't take up so much time talking about our dogs. Perhaps I'll read all of it. But let me just read a little bit. I'll read verses 15 through 17. One lamb. Now, this is describing the sacrificial cultus in the temple of Ezekiel 40 to 47. One lamb shall be given from a flock of 200 from the rich pastures of Israel. These shall be for grain offerings, burnt offerings, and peace offerings. Now watch this. To make atonement for them, says the Lord God. All the people of the land shall give this offering for the prince in Israel. Pardon me. Then it shall be the prince's part to give burnt offerings, grain offerings, and drink offerings at the feasts, the new moons, the Sabbaths, and at all the appointed seasons of the house of Israel. He shall prepare the sin offering, the grain offering, the burnt offerings, and the peace offerings to make atonement for the house of Israel. And I have to tell you, William, and I know that you know this, dispensationalists have a very severe problem with these verses. Number one, in this proposed millennial temple, you have animal sacrifices being offered. Now, when I pointed this out to individuals before, they said, "Oh, well, you have grain offerings and peace offerings." Well, that's true, but you also have burnt offerings. And burnt offerings, they could burn some grains and burn some flour offerings, but burnt offerings were intrinsically supposed to be animal sacrifices. So that's the first problem. By the way, I mentioned this gentleman who had been a part of the Torah observant movement. He was very concerned because the leader of the group that he had been part of was getting ready to do a Passover observance, and he said, they're going to offer a lamb as a sacrifice. He said, what do I tell them? What can I say to them? And I shared with him how from Isaiah chapter 66, the Lord, in predicting the time, which was the first century, according to Stephen's application of the text, that those who offered a bull would be the same as if they killed a man. And those who offered a sacrifice as if they broke a dog's neck. In other words, animal sacrifices would be an abomination to the Lord at the time of the coming of the Lord. And I shared with him Hebrews chapter 10, 5-7, in which the writer, quoting from the Psalms, said, in sacrifice and offering for sin and burnt offerings, you have had no pleasure, but a body you have prepared for me. And so here is Yahweh, all the way back in the time of David, expressing the fact that animal sacrifices were not what he desired. It was the sacrifice of his son that he desired. And this guy had not seen the verses, especially in Hebrews chapter 10. He had heard me on my YouTube videos Isaiah 66, what it foretold, and God's attitude toward animal sacrifices in the time of Jesus. But that seemed to be very, very helpful to him. But the point of fact is, dispensationalists understand they have a real problem here in saying, number one, you have to excuse me with my voice. In cold weather, my throat just closes down even more than ever. But in the proposed millennial temple, dispensationalists know that since they take the view that, well, the Bible says what it means, and it means what it says, then that must obviously be animal sacrifice in the temple. And been challenged on this over and over and over again. I was reading just last Thursday, Philip Morrow, in his book Things to Come. The True Israel. And Philip Morrow was making some really, really excellent points about the danger of offering animal sacrifices as a command of God under the gospel dispensation. And he, like I said, he makes some really, really good points in that book. And so dispensationalists have been challenged on the idea in their paradigm they have to have literal, physical, bloody animal sacrifices. And the interesting thing about this is, I pointed this out a couple of weeks ago. They try to answer the challenge and the issue of animal sacrifices in the millennium. Randall Price, in his large book, The Temple and Bible Prophecy, over 700 pages, he expends a lot of ink trying to explain that the sacrifices that are described in the book of Ezekiel, yes, they will be offered. Yes, they are bloody sacrifices. Yes, they are animal sacrifices. But they're not truly for atonement. They're not truly to make atonement for sin because, after all, Price argues, Jesus has made the perfect one time for all time, perfect sacrifice. Well, he's certainly correct in that, but he then turns around and says and makes the claim, the animals that are described in the book of Ezekiel will, and these are his words, obviously be offered as a memoriam of the sacrifice of Christ. There's only one problem with that argument. What is that problem, William? Did I lose you, William? William must have gone outside to play in the snow. Maybe having a snowball fight with Leora in the yard. Are you back, William?
Yeah, I'm here. I actually had a phone call to come in, so I muted my mic. Go ahead. What's happening?
I thought you must have gone outside to have a snowball fight with Leora or something.
No, absolutely no way.
Okay. Well, I was explaining how the dispensationalists have a problem over the fact that the book of Ezekiel posits animal bloody sacrifices in the millennium. They've tried to answer that, and I've called attention to the fact that Randall Price, in his massive book, The Temple and Bible Prophecy, tries to explain the problem away by saying those sacrifices will be memorials of the true sacrifice and the perfect sacrifice of Christ. And I had said there's only one problem with that, and I had asked you to share with us what that problem is.
Well, I don't know if I, will hit on the specific one that you're talking about, but I mean, you've got a spiritual temple in terms of the Messianic temple, and so having animal sacrifices would demand that you bring back, all the law, the priesthood, and all the rituals of the old covenant. And so that, from my perspective, is not going to work. That's one of the issues that I see.
And that's obviously true. And by the way, that was what Philip Morrow was pointing out in his book, The True Israel of God, that I took note of. I don't know if you were answering the phone there during that period of time or not, but Philip Morrow said, let's be very plain on that. As far as the gospel of Christ is concerned, there is no going back to bloody sacrifices. There is no going back to a literal physical temple. There is no going back to a literal Zadokite or Levitical priesthood. And he makes a really, really powerful point on that. But the point that I was looking for is what is brought out right here in Ezekiel 45:15 through 17, and for the dispensationalists, the problem for men, Price. And by the way, Thomas Ives saw the train coming. Thomas Ives said one of his writings, I've forgotten exactly which one it is right now, but if anyone wants the quote, I can document it. I have it in my files. But Thomas Ives knows that this is a major, major problem for the dispensationalists, and he calls attention to the fact by saying, well, several notable dispensational writers and speakers explain the problem of the animal sacrifices away by saying, well, there'll be memorials. But he said, we must be candid here. We must be honest and face the fact. It does not say that the sacrifices would be for a memorial. It says very clearly they would be made to make atonement for the people. Now, that's a problem. If you're going to say that the animal sacrifices are to be a memorial of the sacrifice of Christ, when the text says they would be to make atonement for the people, then you've got the burden of proof here is squarely on the dispensationalists to explain how to make atonement for the people doesn't mean to make atonement. It means to serve as a memorial. And here's the problem. The Hebrew language, the Hebrew terminology that is used here in Ezekiel 45, 15 to 17, is the exact same, precise, verbatim terminology that is used in the book of Leviticus when the Lord was describing the sacrificial system, what the sacrifices were to be, and why the sacrifices were to be offered, the purpose of the sacrifice, in other words, and 13 times, ladies and gentlemen, in the book of Leviticus, the Lord, in describing, number one, what the sacrifices were to be, number two, describing the purpose for offering the sacrifices, said they were to be offered to make atonement for the people. So here is we have this vocabulary. We have this language. We have these descriptions. We have these purpose clauses given to us and for us in Leviticus, and no one, not even the most argues that in Leviticus that the terminology to make atonement for sin or to make atonement for the people, etc., not even the most ardent and rabid dispensationalist argues that those sacrifices under the Levitical priesthood were to be made as a memorial of the sacrifice of Jesus. You can search the dispensational literature, high and low, across the width and depth and breadth of the literature. You will not find one of them saying, oh yes, the entire Levitical sacrificial system was to offer sacrifices as a memorial. In other words, looking back at, celebrating the death of Christ. No, they never say that. And so the problem for the dispensationalist is you have this background, this entire background history. And by the way, I don't even know how many times, I've not counted it, in the book of Numbers. But I do know that in the book of Leviticus, as I've already taken note, that terminology to make atonement for the sins of the people, to make atonement for the people, is used 13 times. And I suspect it's used that many times and more in the book of Numbers, although I haven't counted that. So here we have this entire background of language, this entire background of the reason being given for the offering of a sacrifice, and it is unequivocally to make atonement for the people, to make atonement for sin, etc. And now we come to the book of Ezekiel, in which the dispensationalist tells us Zadokite Levitical priesthood will be restored. The temple will be restored. The altar will be restored. The animal bloody sacrifices will be restored. And even though the text of Ezekiel that they keep pointing us to, that we must take it literal.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know what happened, but Dunn Preston just got clicked off or booted off or whatever happened, but he was in the final statements. We had about 60 seconds left to go in the broadcast, and so he has his phone call has dropped, and so we apologize for that. But nevertheless, we're going to pick up at the same place on next week, so we encourage you to tune in again on next week, where we'll continue the study from Ezekiel 45 and talk about the Messianic temple and the implications of the sacrifices, circumcision, and the feast days, etc., being carried through into the New Covenant era, and whether or not those things will be fulfilled as some of the dispensationalists tell us, or whether or not these things refer to the time of Ezekiel and then the transformation of them from these material things into the spiritual for the Messianic temple. So stay tuned with us on next week. Again, we apologize for what happened to Don at the very last minute, and maybe he'll tell me, what happened. Hope he didn't push a button and I didn't push a button, but I wasn't touching any buttons, so we'll see what takes place. But until next week, this is William Bell on behalf of both Don Preston and myself saying you have a very pleasant evening and God bless. We thank you for listening, and we'll look forward to seeing you on next week.
Thank you for joining the Two Guys in a Bible radio broadcast. On behalf of Don Preston and myself, we'd like to say have a very pleasant day and may God bless. Until next time, we'll see you on Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust.